range cards at about the same mana costs that really can kind of trump what the red-black aggro deck can do. For example, they're on 3 Olivia Voldarens in the main. They still have their 4 Thrag Tusks and 4 Hunt Masters. And you know, those seem strong. You know, an Olivia is something that actually Ian's deck can't deal with. Once he has 4 Spears, 2 Pillar of Flames, if an Olivia comes down and gets off an activation, that's gonna be very, you know, that'll essentially lock the aggro deck up in the game.
That's very true. One thing I really like about Daniel's deck is that he's got this removal suite that is well diversified, and it's got really great defensive speed. He goes up from a Tragic Slip at 1 to a Dreadbore at 2, or a Mizium Mortars at 2, or Abrupt Decay, and then Murder and Liliana the Veil, and then Sever the Bloodline. So he's got disruption up the curve, and he's got a really good defensive speed.
Right. That said, he's starting to skimp on the low end of his curve, which is kind of this interesting evolution. Normally would be bad against red-black aggro. You know, he's down to 2 Abrupt Decays, 2 Bonfires, 1 Dreadbore, 1 Mizium Mortars, 2 Tragic Slips. It's like, I mean, still has a fair amount of removal, but it's starting to become a little expensive. At the same time, though, the aggro decks we've seen here are starting to cut part of its low end, so that probably goes back to favoring Jund again.
So, like, this sort of removal package, you kind of like at this bigger aggro that, like, Ian has, or like we saw with Cedric before, but you wouldn't want against, like, a Naya Blitz deck.
Yeah, against a Naya Blitz deck, you're starting to lose some points. Granted, these Jund decks were very strong in the aggro metagame. I think we saw a lot of that, with Jund doing pretty well at the Pro Tour, when people were really expecting those red-green aggro decks. And, you know, I do expect this is a matchup where Jund should do very well. Jund somewhat fell out of favor once Junkrites became popular, because that was a deck that was a counter strategy to Jund. You know, it's a grindy deck that's just a little bit grindier, but that said, Jund is very well equipped to deal with smaller creatures, and it's going to be very hard for Ian. Like, even though Ian's playing bigger things to try to get more impact, it's going to be hard for him to compete with the impact of Daniel Lillard's cards. You know, that Thragtusk, Hunt Master, and Olivia are some of the best creatures that you can be playing.
Yeah. So we've seen Daniel keep his 7-card opener. Ian is on the play, and he's mulliganed twice. So he's gonna have a rough time. He has 2 mountains. He's got a Hellrider, and he's got a Knight of Infamy. Looks like he's got a Searing Spear, and was that a Boros Reckoner?
Yeah, I couldn't tell the last card. Yeah, it's a Boros Reckoner.
Yeah.
I mean, Ian's hand on 5 isn't the kind of hand you'd want. Obviously, you can't choose what you keep on 5. He would have preferred to get something with, you know, just a bunch of 1-drops and hoped that his opponent got stuck somehow. Yeah. The problem is that Ian's not going to make. Okay, you know, his first threat is turn 3, and Jund should be able to easily take care of that.
Yeah. That said, you know, hitting land right there.
Yeah, I mean,
and
he gets to play the game. Yeah, no, he can play that. He gets to, maybe if he draws another land, he can make Hellrider next turn. Yeah. Like, I'd be very surprised if Jund doesn't have an answer to that, as we see, you know, Rakdos' return, another Farseek, a Garruk Primal Hunter. If I'm Daniel, I'm almost greedy and just want to Rakdos return. Well, you probably still can't do that.
Yeah, I think, like, you could Farseek and then next turn play Garruk, and, like, that's fairly stabilizing.
Somewhat. 3/3s don't really stabilize against Boros Reckoner, but so what Daniel will hope to do, I mean, it's ambitious. He could hope to try to pull off a card draw with Garruk. You know, that would certainly win the game if he managed to pull one off, but with Boros Reckoner, that probably can't happen.
But really, at this point, Daniel just would like to draw a removal spell, right? Yeah. He's got a bunch of lands, and he had that Farseek, and he's got the Garruk and the Rakdos' return, but, like, those aren't good answers.
His hand is actually fairly soft to aggro right now. Yeah. If Ian draws another land and gets a Hellrider down, he has a shot. It does not look like, and it looks like he did.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Ian has more than a shot right now.
So here comes the Hellrider, and we're going to get in for 8, and suddenly Daniel's under a significant clock. Daniel's
hand was an excellent keep against control and a very weak keep against aggro. Garruk, Primal Hunter, and Rakdos' Return are both key cards in the control matchup. Unfortunately, against an aggro deck, they are pretty out. They don't do much.
Yeah.
And more lands and Farseeks for Daniel Lillard. I don't see him Well, I mean, his only play is to Garrick make a beast, which is really not what he wants to do.
And that only, like, that either gets killed immediately or it keeps the Hell Rider from attacking and saves you some damage, but you're still getting, Ian's still able to attack
If Ian
Reckoner.
just swings Reckoner in response to this, then Daniel's thrilled.
Right.
Because then Ian's not progressing the board state and gives Daniel time to draw a removal spell. So I think he'll be real happy if that happens. Like, Ian probably just smashes into this and takes out everything. I would say they just make them both attack Garrick.
Okay.
And then that will kill the Garrick, and that's what I think that's what you want to have happen.
But so in reality, we know that Ian it looks like he's got a Searing Spear in his hand.
Or interestingly enough, there's a better play. Sorry, I apologize. You can make play Knight of Infamy, make Boros Reckoner attack alone, ping the damage to Garrick Primal Hunter, and then Garrick's dead.
Right.
Because if he blocks,
whether
it's a
blocks,
4/4, so if it blocks and you don't get first strike, redirect, kill Garrick.
Yeah.
And that way you get to keep your Hell Rider on top of it. And that's probably... I mean, you said if he has a Searing Spear, he also has the option of just, go crazy. Kill Beast, kill Garrick, deal damage,
It looks like his hand is Ash Zealot, Searing Spear, and Knight of Infamy.
I mean, that's very strong, if that's his hand.
So we've got a lot of options from Ian. So if you have that hand, I think the play that I would take is I would Searing Spear the Beast, and then I would get 4 damage into Daniel and kill the Garrick.
Yeah, like Searing Spear the Beast, play Ash Zealot, swing.
Yeah. Oh, actually, yeah, we get even more damage in that way. So if we do that...
That looks like Pillar of Flame, not Searing Spear. Or no, that is Spear. Sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
Spear.
So
Spear,
Ash Zealot.
And because of the Hell Rider triggers, he can put 2, he can control, where everything, he can get as much damage as possible in on Daniel.
So we get to do 7 to Daniel and 4 to Garrick.
Yeah, he actually is 1 damage short of being able to win right there.
Yeah.
So he
could...
Yeah. So it looks like he just put Daniel to 1.
Yeah. And so now Daniel has to kill the
he can't.
Hell Rider.
He can't do anything, I don't think, because he can make a blocker. I don't particularly like that we left the Garrick alive there. I don't know how much it actually matters, but I typically would kill him. If you can't kill him, I am in favor of killing the Planeswalker. Keeping the Planeswalker alive gives Daniel more stabilizing plays. Say for example he can make jump blockers here and then draws a kill, has another creature and a kill spell. Now Garrick's still alive. Yeah. That's somewhat of a liability. That said, he looks like he has murder and more lands, so I don't think he can do anything.
He drew the murder this turn, but if the previous turn he had drawn a creature that he could have cast, and so he'd be able to create 2 blockers, Ian would be in a little bit of trouble potentially.
I'm not sure what the tank is on. I don't see how Daniel can deal with 3 creatures.
Yeah, but even then, having the Boros Reckoner out means that Daniel has to have 2 kill spells because he has to kill the Reckoner and the Hell Rider.
Because both of them have to be
It's very, very hard for you to imagine the number, outs to this.
So what he's going to do is he's going to gain information. He's going to see the last card in Ian's hand and then scoop. Okay, Knight of Infamy, neat. And then, and now he's dead. Says go. Okay, the formality, which is good. It's a good practice. Make sure your opponent, make your opponent turn your card sideways. He's going to murder here. I mean, he's at 1. Okay. Yeah, all right. So Ian Kendall on the mold of 5 still pulls it out.
Yeah, and like you were talking about before, it really was because of a mismatch of hands that Daniel had a hand that was very good against control decks and probably pretty good in the mirror, but was not particularly suited to aggro.
The hand is really, was really a glass cannon. The thing is that Ian's draw was not particularly good. It was a 5-card hand that all it was Reckoner into Hell Rider, and really not much else. And Daniel's kind of folded to it pretty hard, and I'm wary, of keeping that hand as a result of that. It seems like, I don't know, maybe he doesn't. Maybe it's very greedy to mulligan that hand, but certainly it's a liability to keep it. I don't think you'll beat any creature deck with that hand.
Yeah, I can imagine that Daniel, looks at that hand and he says, oh, I've got a plan here. I've got lands to play. I've got Farseek to accelerate me. I've got these cards that are very powerful. But maybe wasn't really thinking about, well, do these powerful cards match up against the sorts of decks that I expect to see?
You'd much rather have seen a hand with with a turn 2 Farseek and then into something like a turn 3 second Farseek Abrupt Decay, then slam your Planeswalker or your Rakdos return.
Or like having a Planeswalker and a Thragtusk would make that hand more exciting because you have cards that are good against two different types of strategies.
Yeah. So one of the strengths of Jund is that it has the ability to deal with almost any deck. It's very versatile in what it wants to answer. So typically Jund is better after sideboarding. So looking at the sideboard here, what we have from Daniel Lillard's deck is he has a pair of Pillar of Flames and a pair of Vampire Nighthawks. He has another Mizium Mortars and a Bonfire of the Damned. I'm not positive this is a Bonfire matchup, but certainly Pillars and Nighthawks are warranted here.
So we're potentially bringing in 4 or 5 cards in this matchup, and looks like he's got 2 Ground Seals that are very easy to cut.
Rakdos' return is also very bad here.
Yeah. And so those and maybe the Bonfire or the Sever the Bloodline to just lower the curve.
Exactly, and so he has to, since he has to decide how good he thinks Bonfire is, and that will determine whether or not he boards in the extra one or boards out the main deck ones. I would lean toward boarding out the main deck ones because I don't think, unless it's Miracled, I don't see Bonfire being particularly good. Obviously, Miracled, it'll be insane, but that's a little riskier than I like to do my sideboarding.
And the types of creatures that Daniel saw out of Ian's deck also kind of push towards wanting to get rid of Bonfire because he didn't see the early drops out of Ian's deck, and while he might expect them to be there, he knows that there are things with 3 toughness there that
you saw a Hell Rider, so you have to assume early drops. No, people don't just play Hell Rider for value.
Yeah. So Ian's case, we've got a number of options. We've got 3 Olivia Voldaren, 2 Pillar of Flame, 2 Duress, 1 Thundermaw Hellkite, 1 Tormod's Crypt, 2 Flames of the Firebrand, 2 Augur Spree, 2 Appetite for Brains. The things that I think I'm interested in, maybe a little bit of discard. So I know that I'm interested in the Thundermaw Hellkite. I expect my opponent to have some Thragtusk, to have things that I want to go over.
Daniel Lillard has very few ways to kill things at instant speed, so Thundermaw Hellkite, aside from being a possible game-winning card, which it sometimes is at least a Lava Axe.
I think I might be interested in like 1 or 2 Appetite for Brains as a way to make sure that Daniel doesn't get his powerful late game going.
Yeah, well, you need a way to answer Olivia Voldaren. As kind of stated before, it's one of the ways that Jund stabilizes against you. So whether or not you're boarding in your own Olivias or Appetite for Brains, you need to make sure that you have a play to get around it. Yeah. I agree that I do like Appetite for Brains more there. There's a question as to how high I really want my curve to get. When looking at Ian's deck, he does have these Olivias in the deck. You can't really, because he has 4 Hell Riders, 4 Falconwrath Aristocrats, and 2 Thundermaws in the main, I don't think you can reasonably board in the Olivias without boarding out similar 4s or 5s. Right. So if he may board them in, if he believes they're better than a different card. And, I'm inclined to say that I, in this matchup, probably like Olivia more than, say, Falconwrath Aristocrat. I think it may be a better card here. About half of Daniel's removal still kills the Aristocrat. So maybe if I like it more there, then I'll make that switch. But I don't think you can just board in the extra ones.
Right. And so we're looking to take out some Pillar of Flames and make some switches and what exactly where our top end is.
Searing Spear is probably still fine. Searing Spear can kill an Olivia the turn he plays it. It can kill a Huntmaster, and it can kill a Planeswalker, and it can go to the Dome. I think with all those different options, it's still a fine card. Yeah. Pillar of Flame, less so.
That makes sense. So we are shuffling up for game 2, and
looks like
Ian may have
Ian's on the mulligan again. Which didn't really hurt him last game. He's good. So.
Yeah. And like this can actually be a mark of a really good player, that he's able to assess his matchup and say, this is the sort of hand that may look good against certain types of decks, but actually is not what I need in this matchup. And so I'm going to make the mulligan and go to 6, and I'm not going to be afraid about being down a card, because I understand how these games are going to play out and what a game where I win looks like.
Right. So we actually had a question here from Twitter that I'd like to throw at you, being an L2 judge. Someone asked what the official ruling was on sideboarding and shuffling time. You notice that on camera, people seem to take a while. They're seeing, usually people are taking about 5 minutes. So what is the actual tournament policy on that? If you're familiar.
So we used to have a actual time limit for sideboarding and for preparation. Right? It was 3 minutes, and so if we saw that somebody from the moment a game ended to the time they presented was taking more than 3 minutes, that would be something that we would caution them about and possibly issue a slow play warning on. We've recently revised that particular rule to say we're not actually going to establish a strict time limit on this thing. Instead, we're going to treat it like any other slow play offense where it's really appropriate to the situation. We're going to make a decision based on that. So looks like Ian kept his 6, and we are moving on now. And so no 1-drop from Ian, but he has a 2-drop in the Night of Infamy.
He also has the Appetite for Brains, and of note, he's not really playing it until turn 3, which is probably correct. He wants to fully maximize the value on it, not lose to a drawn Olivia. And his curve with his opening hand was pretty rocky, so I don't think he wasn't worried about not being able to cast it on curve.
Yeah, and it looks like Daniel only has red and black mana, and he's got a number of
Primal
green
Hunter is
spells in his
not
hand.
actually a card here. You don't have to take.
So there's a Thragtusk, and there's a Rakdos' Return, a Farseek, and I'm not sure what that black card is. Maybe a Sever?
It's Sever.
Okay.
So, based on his hand has a Falconwrath Aristocrat in it. I think the clear pick here is Sever the Bloodline.
Okay.
Thragtusk, if his opponent draws a green, is pretty good here. But, yeah, I'm going to take
So
Sever.
we're taking the Sever.
Because, you can answer everything else with the Aristocrat that's in your hand.
And so we have two mountains.
And right off the top.
Right off the top. So we're going to Farseek here, and then have both players discard probably and discard the Garruk.
Yeah. As a player, that's one of the things you always you always have to be sure this sort of thing doesn't tilt you when this happens. You look at your opponent's hand, you're like, his hand's bad, he's stuck off green. And the next turn he draws a Farseek, and he top decked it. You're just like,
Yeah.
But
it doesn't matter where the card that
exactly.
puts them ahead comes from. It's how you adjust to that.
Yeah. So that does. The Liliana still ticks up. That does make things more dicey for Ian. He doesn't really have. I don't think he has the weapons to deal with everything in Daniel's hand.
So we're getting rid of the Rakdos' Return, which actually maybe makes more sense than Garruk.
Absolutely. Garruk can win you the game. Rakdos' Return is probably just a Blightning at this point.
Yeah. And it may not even be that, because we're not going to play it the next turn.
I'm actually very surprised to even see the card still in his deck.
Yeah. No, that was one of the cards that you identified as something we want to take out, and it is a singleton. So maybe he just missed that.
Well, the other option was for him to not discard at all. Ian's deck has so much haste that you kind of have to assume the Liliana's not getting any more value at this point. And it might be that the card is more valuable in Jun's hand than it is in red-black aggro's hand. Sometimes I know when you play against a Liliana, it's the correct play to leave it alive in the hope that your opponent will start ticking it up.
Yeah.
So Ian with an aerial assault here.
Yeah, so we had Falconwrath Aristocrat into a Thundermaw Hellkite, and suddenly Daniel is down to 7 life, I believe?
Yeah, well here...
oh wait, no, sorry, it's going to be higher than that because of the Thragtusk.
So here's where you see that trump card, which you're talking about, Olivia Voldaren is now in Daniel Lillard's hand. He's gonna have to shock and cast Olivia. He doesn't have time for the Garruk anymore.
Yeah. So we get in with Thragtusk, then we're going to play the Olivia, and I assume that we're going to ping the Falconwrath Aristocrat as a way to either kill it or get Ian to sacrifice the Thundermaw.
Right, so this kills one of the 2 creatures.
Yeah. And you'd rather have the Thundermaw than the Aristocrat, I assume.
Well, yeah, it doesn't particularly. Yeah, you're giving your opponent the choice. You're planning to steal one of these. It doesn't particularly matter. He should let it die, because that way, if he were to sack the Thundermaw, then Daniel would immediately have the mana to steal the Aristocrat.
Yeah.
And now he has to draw a land at least to steal Hellkite next turn, which probably still happens, but At least gives Ian some play.
Yeah, and Ian makes the heads-up play of sacrificing the Falconwrath Aristocrat to itself, so that
it actually can't do that. It only sacrifices another creature. So it actually died to damage.
Really?
I believe so. I'll double check on that. I believe Falconwrath cannot sacrifice itself. No, sorry, it can. Okay, it's Cartel Aristocrat that cannot sacrifice itself.
Right.
Sorry, so they're not actually the same card.
Yeah. So by doing that, what Ian does is he prevents the Olivia from getting the counter, because the ability is countered by the game rules because it doesn't have a valid target.
So then that would actually, if he'd drawn a Searing Spear, it would have been a very relevant play.
But so we have a Hell Rider here, and we're shipping in with these creatures, and Daniel takes 2 from the Hell Rider, and the question is, like, can he afford?
No, I think he has to block here. If he doesn't block, he goes to far too low of a life total. He's gonna have to just draw another answer off the top that he doesn't have too many of here.
And so Daniel's actually kind of punished by that for that attack with the Thragtusk the previous turn. If he hadn't attacked with it, he would have had a good block there, and he'd still have the Olivia in play, which would make land draws live.
Which like right now, I think that it would completely change the outcome of the game.
But now, like, we have to play a Garrick.
Even in that situation, it may have been right to take the Hell Rider hits, just because of how few plays this leaves him with.
So he tapped his mana wrong. If we can let the people there.
No. He said because he can't actually set Cavern onto Planeswalker.
Right. So he has to leave up 2 red-black lands.
Yep, he caught it.
But so Daniel now has to draw and hope to hit a removal spell.
He's hoping to hit Dreadbore.
Yeah. So
which he has
draw
1 of.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The last one does not find it.
Did not get there.
And that should be the match.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still a little confused on the last play. The chump block was probably not called for.
Well, so if you don't chump block,
you go to 2.
You go to 2.
Terrible, because Hell Rider can just kill you from 2. But
yeah, so do you at that point you have to hope to draw a land, ping the Hell Rider, steal the Hell Rider, and then chump the Hellkite?
I mean, things are still bad. You try to you'd steal the Hellkite and hope he just doesn't have stuff going on. You go to 1 on a swing, and life's not good yet. Things are dicey.
But you get to continue the game for at least 1 more turn and hope to, like, hit a Miracle Bonfire.
Yeah, I think so. So anyway, Ian Kendall, 2 games to 0, moves to 3-0.
Yep.
Standard Open. Still a long path though to the top 8.
That's true, but very tight play from Ian. Knew exactly what he was doing there, and was able to pull in the game. So we're going to go ahead and check on our other matches. Hopefully we'll have one